One of the most common questions I get asked in our programs and masterclasses is how can I improve my sleep when my nervous system is dysregulated? And in today's video, we're going to look at the link between sleep and dysregulation, or the nervous system, particularly following periods of chronic and traumatic stress. In order to get to sleep and stay asleep, we need to access a blended state known as stillness. So let's take a look at the different states of the nervous system, the primary states, and also some of the blended states to help you understand how your nervous system works. So in the green state, we might call this our ventral vagal state. And this is where we feel safe, connected, and calm. Our nervous system is regulated. And this is where the part of our vagus nerve is working that slows our physiology down. It's also the state where we connect with others. Now, if I experience a threat, I may move into the sympathetic system. And this is the system that mobilizes my energy, or that fight or flight branch. And then the third state, if I was not able to get away from that threat, that I would move into would be the dorsal vagal state, or an immobilization state. So this is why some people freeze when they're facing stress. Now, this red state we also move into from a branch of our vagus nerve, but when we have this combined with our ventral state, it's what immobilizes our energy enough so that we can come into deep states of stillness, sleep, and restorative rest. So to understand this more, let's take a look at what happens in an acute stress response. So when we face a stressor, the very first thing that happens is that we get a loss of that vagal brake, or the green state. So this allows our energy to speed up and our heart to speed up. And at the same time, we also get an increase in the sympathetic activation. Now, we'll feel this activation or mobilization of energy in our body. Our heart may beat faster, we may feel heat and tension in the shoulders, or we may feel like we need to get ready to run or move away. After this stressor had passed, however, and if we recover fully, the sympathetic nervous system goes back to where it started from, and we also see a rebound in the vagal brake. So it comes back to where it started from. We have this inbuilt ability to recover from stress. And what this means is that stress isn't actually bad for us, provided that we get to recover fully from it. It actually can make us more resilient at coping with challenges. In the case of chronic stress, however, where we don't get to recover from this, we can see that our nervous system gets retuned. So just like what we spoke about before, we get a loss of the vagal brake and we get an increase in that sympathetic activation. But when there's a failure to discharge that sympathetic activation, we find that this sympathetic system remains tuned, or there's ongoing activation. And we find that there's that loss of the vagal brake. Essentially, this is what may predispose us to feeling anxious. And it's simply because the nervous system hasn't had the chance to recover or discharge that stress activation. So when our nervous system has become retuned for sympathetic activation, we may find that we're wound up even when we're trying to go to sleep. It's a little bit like having too much accelerator in the car and we're still going too fast. We need to be able to wind back that sympathetic activation in order to fall asleep and also to stay asleep. So the vagus nerve is made up of a series of connections rather than being just one nerve. We mentioned before with that green state, that ventral branch runs through our chest, innervating the lungs, so affecting our breath and also the heart. And it also runs up to our face and affects the muscles involved with communication and speech. Now, the other branch that we have is this dorsal vagal branch that runs primarily underneath the diaphragm and down into the gut. This is a more primitive branch and it's unmyelinated. So if we thought of myelin like electrical covering around a cord, that helps a nerve impulse be conducted fast and also accurately. Because the dorsal vagal branch isn't myelinated, it's not as accurate. And sometimes it can slow us down too much and take us down into that state of shutdown, feeling flat, and that sense of apathy. But this is also the branch that we need to access if we want to be able to get to sleep, because its role is immobilization and energy conservation. In the case of traumatic stress, what we'll see is a loss of the vagal brake at the start, like what happened in the other two cases. We see that big spike in the sympathetic activation, but we also see a co-activation of our dorsal vagal system. And this can create a freeze response for some people. So the feeling like the accelerator is on in the car from the sympathetic system, but it's also like the handbrake is on and we can't go anywhere. So people feel the urge that they need to do something, but they're also stuck. If we don't discharge the stress activation and recover from this, we may still have these ongoing cycles of freeze, particularly as we come to face stresses in the future. We may also experience times where we're in shutdown and feel flat and disconnected, and other times where we feel more of that sympathetic energy as well. So sympathetic activation or freeze are the states that we are meant to be using for short-term stresses. So we could think of them as sprinters, like we'd use them for 10 minutes. They're not intended to function as long-term ways of being. When we experience repeated chronic stress, or we have that same ongoing co-activation of the sympathetic and dorsal vagal branch, then these responses slowly begin to undermine the maintenance of homeostasis, or that balance of our nervous system. And we will see changes in sleep, in digestion, and also in things like inflammation. So if you're not getting to sleep or staying asleep, it's likely that you're not going into that blended state of stillness where we have access to both our ventral vagal branch of our vagus nerve and the dorsal vagal branch as well. So to improve our sleep, we need a bioplasticity reset, or a change in that set point. And this means that instead of responding with too much accelerator or too much accelerator and brake, we have a wind back of that accelerator that allows us to come back into stillness. And this is where building vagal tone is so important, so that we can come into that blended state. So some helpful solutions can be trying to start with a gentle stretching routine in the early evening. And this can be helpful to discharge the activation in the sympathetic nervous system, but it's not going to activate your physiology like other exercise would. Secondly, light pressure on the eyeballs or the forehead can actually slow your heart rate down through what's known as the ocular cardiac reflex. Eye pillows can be a wonderful way to also stimulate the vagus nerve as well, and this can be another thing that helps you to fall asleep as well as stay asleep. It can also be useful if you can get to sleep and wake up at the same time each day. So getting to bed by 11 p.m. and waking up at 7 a.m. can help to reset your hormonal systems as well. Morning sunlight and exercise outdoors can also help with your cortisol levels, or using a light box in the morning. You'll find more details on improving your sleep routine in the attached worksheets.